you all kind of survived to this part of the boot camp. Hopefully this is the hump. We're going to try standing, assuming that's not too awkward. We decided to do this kind of like fireside chat style. So I'm Bob, this is Jake, by the way. And we're basically just going to interview each other on stuff that I think might bring up some interesting anecdotes from kind of the history of how the company got started and some of the things that have taken us to where we are today. Maybe the kind of default starting question that I'll lob over to you is entrepreneurship before RJMetrics, and anything that you were doing that kind of clued you into the fact that this might be what you want to do.
Sure. So I love answering this question before Bob because my answer is much less impressive. I basically, yeah, that would have been a great time to laugh. Yeah. Thanks.
Take that very seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, so before RJMetrics, my entrepreneurial career basically amounted to a landscaping business that I started in high school. And I guess you could call it a lean approach in that I stuffed mailboxes around my town with flyers that mocked the fact that we were high school kids trying to get in their yards to steal all their leaves and stuff like that. We got some business and it worked well. And I think the thing that really kind of turned me on to this path was it was just really appealing to me that it was a very I had ownership over the entire life cycle. I could recruit my friends to do the landscaping jobs. I could market to the people locally. And if I didn't do it, I had no money. And if I did do it, I kind of controlled my destiny. I could set my hours and I can do whatever sorts of things I wanted to. I then took a break for many years on my entrepreneurial journey and then went to a VC firm, which is where I ultimately met Bob. But in between there, I had high school and college. But now, Bob, why don't you give your super impressive answer to the question?
Yeah. So I actually very similarly in high school had a business that, so Jake and I both graduated from high school in 2002. So if you think about what that means for like your formative years, starting high school in 1998 and then graduating in 2002 means that like the internet boom and burst all happens while like you are kind of like becoming an adult. And when I started out in high school, everyone that I read about in the news was getting rich on tech stocks and was starting up tech companies and things like that. So I started learning web design and programming and decided to start a company with the sole intent of, at the time, like Microsoft was a big acquirer. So the idea was start a company, give it a really impressive name, and like Microsoft will just come along and buy it. And it doesn't matter what it does, it just needs to have a cool name. So I built this company called Quam Industries.
Super impressive.
Yeah,
by the way.
It sounded super impressive. And I was like doing web design for the local like auto mechanic, and like my most marquee client was Tony Luke's, the cheesesteak place. Eventually landed those guys, and it was all. It was crappy 1998, 1999 grade websites. It was stuff that should have been on GeoCities. But there was a lot of interest in websites getting built. There were not a lot of people with those skills out there. And because I had that going, I didn't have to, get a job working at the Wawa that summer. I was able to kind of be self-sufficient in that way. And that kind of created the entrepreneurial bug. And then in college, I had a couple of different businesses that were at various places on the success spectrum. So the one that's probably most noteworthy was the one software company that I actually built there, where when I was a sophomore, so this is now 2004, anybody that like paid attention to pop culture trends around then probably noticed the Texas Hold'em poker craze. So around that time is when Chris Moneymaker won the World Series of Poker, and it was like on ESPN2 all day, every day, around the clock. Rounders came out on DVD, great movie if you haven't seen it, and all these things in combination led to, and number 3, most importantly, online gambling in online Texas Hold'em rooms existed, and you could get your money in and get your money out, and the FTC had not yet cracked down on actually being able to gamble for real money online. So there was this perfect trinity of things happening at once where every single person on every college campus in the country was in these poker rooms playing poker all the time, hopefully winning money away from people who were not as good at poker. And I was in a major at the time, it was my major, that was like a mixture of statistics, computer science, and economics. And I was taking classes about algorithms and data structures. I was taking classes about probability theory. I was taking classes about operations research and things like Monte Carlo simulations. And I decided to take my sophomore year summer, so the summer after sophomore year, off to build a piece of software. And I built this piece of poker software that basically calculates your odds of winning a Texas Hold'em poker hand based on how many people are at the table, what cards you have, what's been shown out so far in the community cards. And there was no software like this at the time. It was not a brilliant piece of software, but it was the first to market. And Google AdWords was starting to get big at that time, and I could buy ads for like 10 cents a click that were how to win at poker, poker odds, like all these things that people might be Googling when they would want this software. And I would sell the software for $30 a pop, and the conversion rates were fantastic from these 10-cent clicks into these $30 sales. So in my sophomore and junior year, I was just selling this poker software over the web. Like I'd wake up in the morning and check my email, and I'd have 20 more of these things that got sold overnight. And that taught such a big lesson about software and the scalability of the software business model, just where I invested a lot of time up front and a lot of opportunity costs, but we ended up in this spot where I could basically print money for, it wasn't enough that it was like an annual salary for a person with a real job, but for a college student, I was making enough money that it was like, I never want to do anything but this with my life. I ended up getting into some weird stuff. Junior, senior year, I licensed the algorithms from that to the Sharper Image, who manufactured it in a handheld device. What they failed to ask was like, who the hell is going to like hold a handheld device like in a casino and calculate their odds of winning? It was their worst selling product ever, and Sharper Image went bankrupt like 6 months later. Those two things I don't think are connected, but I in total made $0 from that whole, I spent like a year and a half on that deal. So the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. But yeah, after graduating, went to work at Insight Venture Partners, the venture firm in New York. Jake and I started on the same day. And yeah, great transition to the next question. What the job at Insight, how did that prepare you to become an entrepreneur? And what were the details of what that job entailed?
So I think there were two important pieces that really kind of prepared me for this job and for starting this company. I think number one was we talked to, over the course of like 2.5 years, literally 1,000 different entrepreneurs, and interviewed them about their business, asked them what was working well, what wasn't working, and just got an amazing firsthand education about what they were doing. And the side effect that had was it reminded me that, oh my gosh, I'm way more excited about their job than my job. Even the ones that weren't doing that well, it just seemed much more interesting to be in where they were. And it also just kind of was like an amazing startup 101, like these spaces are working, these spaces aren't. What we kind of had to do in order to set up those 1,000 conversations was a tremendous amount of cold calling, cold emailing, following up with people who didn't really want to talk to us. And the thing that was crazy is that we were trying to get in touch with them to give them millions of dollars. So it's maybe the easiest cold sale ever, but there are also a bunch of other people trying to reach out to these companies, the ones that are doing well at least. And it's just like high school, the ones that are super popular, everybody wants to talk to them and they don't want to talk to you, but the ones that kind of suck, they're totally down to talk to you. Although everyone's a good person in high school. This just basically this concept of, I was, straight out of college. I mean, we all were. They hired people right out of school. You get put on the website. They say that you went wherever you went. You graduated whenever you graduated, and you have no professional context. You have no knowledge of the industry, and you're just trying to get in touch with somebody and ask them extremely intimate questions about their business. And half the time they wouldn't return your phone call, and half the time they would literally just tell you everything. And that blew my mind that they were willing to tell us that stuff. And I think that's a huge parallel to when we actually started doing this business, where I didn't realize you could just call up a company and ask them, what's your revenue? And what's your biggest pain point? And how many people do you have working for you? And what's the biggest frustration you have? And half the time people will tell you to blow off, and half the time people will just tell you the answer. And they'll give you the roadmap for selling them or investing in their company or figuring out which one of their competitors are good. So that just totally blew my mind that you could actually do that. And it just requires investing time. And the thing that really blew my mind is that I would start off calling a space. Like I looked into healthcare software. And I know nothing about healthcare software when I graduated college. I knew software was a good thing. I knew healthcare was important. And that's pretty much it. So I basically just got a list of all the attendees to the HIMSS conference, which is like thousands of healthcare information technology companies. And I just started calling down that list. And for the first 50 conversations, I sounded like a total idiot. What do you do? Who are your competitors? And then when you talk to 3 different radiology software companies, you start to learn a lot about radiology software. And then you talk to like 5 or 10, and you start to like tell them stuff that they don't necessarily know, because the guy, number 2 told you something that you can then tell to number 10. And I thought that was such like an empowering experience, that in a small period of time, I could become, or at least seem like, an expert. And so that when, fast forward to RJMetrics, when we start talking to people in this context, I also, had done a bunch of research before starting the company, but still felt like an idiot in every initial conversation. But then after, talking to 10 companies, talking to 20 companies, eventually, like, I knew the answer of the question, and I could just ask them the question so they would say the thing that I wanted, so I could move them along to the next stage of the process. And I feel like I'm so grateful for having a job that required me to cold call people, because I don't know that there's any way to actually learn that outside of failing for a little while and then realizing that anybody can be good at it with practice, and then it was amazing. So Bob, while I was doing all that code calling, what were you doing at Insight?
Yeah, so we had the same exact job, right? So we showed up on the same first day and got basically told the same thing, which is call 100 companies a week and get all the revenue information. The difference was that Jake was really good at it and that I hated it, and as a result was not really good at it. And my way of coping with that was, like, I would try to game the system in every way possible, falling back onto my software skills. So I did not get hired here because I had a computer science background, but I happened to know how to write code. So I started writing like apps for the firm that would automatically go out and like scrape all of the RSS feeds that were going on and parse out company names and cross-reference them with Alexa traffic rankings, and then tell me who to call so I wouldn't have to call all these companies. And it kind of worked. But in the meantime, everybody, like, I got a reputation around there of being able to write code. And from a macro perspective, so now we're in like 2006 to 2008, this really interesting thing was happening where basically the cost of storing and transferring data was plummeting. And the companies that were getting started and that were running there, even compared to their, the cohort that was 5 years younger than them, was just drowning in data. These are e-commerce businesses, software as a service businesses, anybody who's doing business transactionally on the internet. They had these huge back-end databases where they were storing every single piece of information about the people that interacted with their businesses and how they did that. So when that happens and Insight starts doing these deals, it gets to the point where when you decide you want to give somebody $50 million, you do this thing called due diligence, which is basically making sure that you actually want to give them $50 million by looking for skeletons in their closet. And it used to be that you could ask a company, hey, give me all your customer data, and they'd send you an Excel spreadsheet. And these companies that sell $50,000 or $100,000 contracts, it's who's the client, how much money, length of the contract, a couple hundred rows, and you've got a multi-million-dollar business you're analyzing. If you're looking at an e-commerce company where the average order value is $20, and they're a $20 million a year business, and they've been around for 5 years, then you have millions and millions and millions of records that you need to look at. Excel's never going to be able to open those. So I happen to know how to write these things called SQL queries, which allow you to go into data that lives in these back-end databases and consolidate that data, slice and dice it in different ways, and learn things from that. So I ended up doing, while I was at Insight, more due diligence work than I did cold calling because they needed it. And as a result, ended up doing a lot of these analyses around customer lifetime value, cohort analysis, terms that you'll kind of hear be relevant in the RJ story as we get to starting the business. But the other thing that was happening in parallel was that the weird discontinuity of my narrative here is that I just said that while I was in college I never want to be doing anything else but software, and then I turned around and took a job at a finance company as soon as I graduated. So how do I reconcile those two things? When I graduated from college, I said, I don't have the idea yet, I don't have the team yet, I want to take on this amazing opportunity to meet all these entrepreneurs, and then I will figure out, and these amazing coworkers.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. That's where I was going.
How to build an amazing business and then go and try to do that. So I made this huge mistake while I was working at Insight, which I tried to start a company on the side while I had a full-time job going on, and I bet that a lot of you are doing that right now. So not to knock that in its entirety, but I was learning about a lot of these businesses in the affiliate marketing space, which are basically companies that you can often start up as a 1 or 2 person operation if you can get some scale and some traffic. You can refer a lot of traffic to retailers and then if that traffic buys stuff, you get a cash payment back from them. And I uncovered while at Insight a handful of these affiliate marketing businesses where it was like 1 or 2 people operating the company. They had $1 million in revenue and $700,000 a year in EBITDA that they were putting right into their pocket. And Insight was not interested. It's not a super interesting business. Nobody's going to buy that. It's not going to scale. But these entrepreneurs were in amazing shape. They were putting almost $1 million a year of cash into their pocket, and they were literally doing the 4-hour work week thing and just like printing money. So I wanted to get in on that action and decided that I could maybe start an affiliate marketing website on the side while I was at Insight, and if I could get it up and running, then I could kind of do the entrepreneurship thing while cutting around the fact that I had a full-time job. What I did not appreciate was how hard that would be. So I didn't have any time to write code, so I outsourced the coding to a third-party firm, which was a huge mistake, which kind of allowed me to lose control over the code base, so I didn't have a ton of flexibility into what was being built long-term. And worked for about a year on this thing called smartraise.com, which is now completely defunct. But it was an affiliate marketing business that helped charities and local organizations raise money for their groups by having all their supporters go and shop at an online shopping mall. And then it would split the affiliate commissions with them. There are actually a lot of businesses out there that do that as a model now. And none of them are huge, but there's some that have a decent amount of traction. And this business just kind of was like flaming out, not quite making it, wasn't quite doing what it needed to. And this is probably where the first like lean startup-y move related to RJMetrics came into play, because I was itching to go and do entrepreneurship full time, but I had a feeling that this particular business model was just not going to cut it. And I, in this show of like when you do that, and many of you have probably been through this, like the ego associated with shutting down a business or like admitting fault is so crippling. And it's like I'm way better at admitting failure today than I was back then, but I did not want to let this thing go. Like I had told my parents, it's like this thing I'm really excited about. All my friends, I like posted on Facebook, go check this out. And for me to shut this down like felt like a something that would just like hurt me at my core. So the question I asked was, what else can I do that's kind of in this space where it'll be more like a pivot than a shutdown, and I can actually go do some interesting things. So I set up meetings with a whole bunch of nonprofits in New York City, and went to them and basically pretended like I had built a whole bunch, like this big software suite that did a whole bunch of things. So it would do the affiliate marketing online shopping mall. If you wanted to have a mobile version of your website, it would host that. If you wanted like a database of all your donors, it would do that. If you wanted to like analyze your donor base and see who the most valuable donors are and how to get more like them, it would do that. If you wanted to like go and set up something where you were doing email marketing with your existing customer base, it would do that. And I met with all these nonprofits, and every single one of them said, I am very slow moving in my organization. I have no money to spend. I would not buy any of these things except for that analytics thing. If you can tell me about my donors and who the most valuable ones are and where they came from and how to get more like them, that is something that I have budget that I would pay money for. And I went back and thought about it and realized that it was the same exact analysis that I was doing for for-profit companies at Insight during the day. It was the same exact thing. And decided to ask the same question of businesses that were for-profit companies, and they said all the same exact things except for that, hey, I'm slow moving and I don't have any money part. And that was like the origin of the RJMetrics idea, was this quasi pivot and ultimate kind of transition into RJ. But RJMetrics, technically, the actual like corporation that we are today, if you look at you can like look it up in the Delaware records, we started out as this thing called Donor Loyalty Corporation, which was a C Corp that was doing exactly that stuff I was describing. And I had never raised any money for it or anything. It was totally clean cap table. So when we decided to do RJMetrics, we just like renamed it to RJMetrics. So it's actually this company is still that same Donor Loyalty Corp from back in, I guess it was 07, 08 era. So we got started and we didn't have a product, but we decided to join forces. Jake knew what he was doing on the sales and business development side. I could build it. What were you doing while I was building that thing?
So that was a big question for me. Like I quit my job about within 1 week of Lehman Brothers going bankrupt. This was late 2008. And so I showed up at Bob's house in South Jersey on, I think it was October 1st. And I was like, all right, am I rich yet? Like what else do we have to do? It was a little bit of like existential angst about like, okay, well, I took a programming class in high school. I no, I'm not good enough to actually build a product. So like what do we do on day one? And there were a couple things I did to try to get up to speed, like things like just talking to a lot of people. Like I said before, I got certified in MySQL development so I could like just speak the language. But ultimately, my main goal was just talking to as many people as possible and convincing them to buy this thing that did not exist. And I think we made a ton of mistakes, but some of the things that I'm glad that we did, and we did early, is that we never said this is a beta product. We never said this is something that we're putting out for free, that we want feedback. This is a thing. It does all this stuff. Do you want to buy it? And there was a price. The price was pulled out of my ass on every single conversation, where sometimes it would cost $200, sometimes it would cost $1,000, sometimes it would cost $50, just to try to see what price would actually resonate with people. And virtually everybody said no. Part of it was because we had no images of the product they could look at. We had no demo they could see. No one had ever heard of us. There were any number of reasons to say no. But the thing that was so valuable was to collect all these reasons for no. And as we started to do this, we see a lot of people wanted to play with a live demo of the software. So one of the first thing we built was, let's just build the ability to log in to the website and see the software with a sample data set. We couldn't integrate with your backend data at that point. We couldn't really do anything, but we could fill in your information. You get access to Vandelay Industries. We're both big Seinfeld fans. We thought someone else might appreciate that too. So like, that was something that a lot of people want, so we built that. Eventually, like 3 months later, we got someone to say, yes, I'll try it. And the thing that was kind of crazy at that point is that Bob had been programming that entire time, and we kind of had a product-ish, like it wasn't like a full thing. It took both of us working full-time for a month to implement them. But as far as they know, like there's some software that takes a year to implement. So we were basically building it after we said, yes, we'll take your money. We took the $200 a month PayPal subscription, which I still have that email in my inbox. Not in my inbox, but in my Gmail. And we said, yes, sure, we'll deliver this. Technically did not, there was no way for us to deliver the thing that they wanted. But we just built it. And then we kind of rinsed and repeated on that process many times. But some of the things that were like a challenge when we were getting started is, who do we talk to? And part of it was, we tried to leverage our networks as much as possible, friends of ours, people from old jobs. And since we worked at a VC firm, we had dealt with companies who had a need around this. We had a lot of other friends who were in that industry. And our last couple of months at that job was kind of doing our job, kind of, trying to source leads for the new business. But there were people that just got tremendously confused about what we were doing and why we were doing it. And so it was just a lot of repeat over and over again, and I think one of the things that was really important is it wasn't that we were just looking for feedback. We had a specific hypothesis. We were like, we have a product that does this, even though we didn't have the product. It costs that. Do you want to sign up today, yes or no? Whereas I think if you say, here's the product, is it a good idea? Everybody's going to say yes, because it costs nothing to say yes. It's just, sure, yes, I'm not a jerk. Your product's a good idea. But I think the fact that we were asking for the actual ultimate transaction early on was hugely helpful, because all those people that would have eventually said no to buy, we got that no in the first conversation.
And it's not always an intuitive thing about, the price is too high
yeah.
either. One in particular, early on we met up with the team at Mentor Tech, Brett Topsy and Michael Aronson, and just to kind of let them know what we were up to. And they said, oh, we've got this client, this portfolio company called Diapers.com,
right.
which is blowing up. It's exploding in size. You should talk to them and try to sell them the product. You want to tell them how that
Yeah,
all
sure. So it was one of the most valuable conversations I had in the business, where I get the CEO, Mark Lower, on the phone. I'm doing my pitch. I'm saying how great it is. And he cuts me off about 2 minutes into it. And he's like, I'm going to stop you right there. We're not going to be a customer of this. And I don't really I'm not really interested in the rest of the pitch. There's a couple things that you should know, though. Number one, we built this ourselves. We spent 20 people over the course of multiple years. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we're good on this front. So you have literally no chance of selling us. And he said, I had quoted him $500 a month for this price. He said, when I hear that price, I assume you're terrible. Either that the product is terrible, or you guys are not good at running your business, or just that you don't understand what kind of business that we are, but a tool like this sold to a company like us should cost more money than that. And so I take that as a huge signal that you guys don't know what you're doing. And that was incredibly useful because since then, $500 was the most I ever had the balls to charge anyone at that point. And we've since charged people more than that. And our product has gotten way better, and we've done all these things to improve the offering. But it was like, it was incredibly educational for me to hear that my answer is no because the price is too low. And maybe ultimately if we had asked him for $100,000 a month, he would have got to the decision that it wasn't worth it. But $500 a month was enough to tell him that this is not worth investigating. So I think all sorts of signals, whether it's what's on your pricing page, whether it's the collateral you're providing, it's the demo, it's if you have a much better salesperson than me, all those things kind of send those signals about what kind of product it is and what kind of customer you're going after. So I think getting those no's and really drilling into why. I mean, fortunately, if you can sell to Mark Lohr, I would highly recommend it because he'll just tell you why you suck. But it's often more nuanced than that. You kind of have to pick apart and kind of like give them a magic wand. Someone says, oh, well, I don't need this right now, or like my budget cycle doesn't come up at the end of the year. I say, okay, fast forward to the end of the year, I'm going to have the exact same product. Will you say yes now? And will you sign a non-binding contract to that effect to promise me that you will? And then usually there's another reason that they don't think it's that great, or they need some other proof, or things like that. But the richness of data in that no set is incredibly valuable. So sometimes when I talk to people about the beginning stage of the company, one of the obvious questions is, was I just cold calling all these people? And I actually, fortunately, did not have to do that much of it in the beginning of RJMetrics. There was some, and there was a lot of networking through people. But I had this incredibly valuable stream of leads that we were doing. And this is started before we actually had a product. All we had was a website and a form on that website where you could fill it out and contact us to get more information. And then I'll set the stage with, we had about 30 visitors to the website before this, most of which were me and my mom. And then Bob did some great stuff.
Yeah, we've used a strategy of PR hacking here throughout the history of the company that has been really, really fruitful. And in the early days, that amounted to investigative journalism related to tech and the internet, specifically for the purposes of infiltrating community news sites. And at the time, Hacker News has always been big, but Dig was huge, Slashdot was really huge. And if you could get something to #1 or really high on the rankings on a site like that, you could end up with tens of thousands of unique visitors coming to your website at any given moment. So in late 2008, during this period where we had no customers and Jake was cold calling people and we kind of just had this website with a form on it. The other thing that we had was a blog, which also had no content on it. But I was driving down the street and I saw this lawn sign sitting in the road that said, this is in Collingswood, it said, CollingswoodSingles.com. And I thought to myself, that is weird for a number of reasons. Because it either means that there is some very, very adventurous internet entrepreneur that is right here in Collingswood that has decided that Collingswood alone, which is a population of, 8,000 people or something, is a big enough market of singles that I'm going to go and create an entire dating website network around that. So that's option one. Option two is, there's somebody doing this in more than one town. And they've done it in so many towns that they got to Collingswood, which is the tiniest town with nothing but married couples with kids. So I kind of forgot about it, and I was up at reunions at Princeton, and I was driving through Princeton, and I saw this sign on a post that said PrincetonSingles.com. I was like, holy crap, there's another one. And then I was up in New York. Insight was on Fifth Avenue, and I was collecting my last paycheck or something, and I'm walking down the street, and on a light post on Fifth Avenue in New York City, FifthAvenueSingles.com. I was like, something's going on here. So I took all those domains and I did reverse IP lookups to find all the servers they were located on, and then you can go through these certain domain tools where you can actually find all of the domain records that have an A record that is pointing to those same exact servers. So I did a bunch of these backtracing things and basically found tens of thousands of websites that had been registered. Basically every single town name that you can imagine, singles.com, and then they were all kind of traced back to these weird like shell companies, and like it was like domains by proxy. So part one is somebody had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars registering domains to do this. Part two is they have developed a infrastructure where they can actually dispatch people to hang up these like cheap lawn signs everywhere, like blanketing the entire country. This amounted to like a 5,000 word long blog post where I detailed everything that I did. And I ended up finding what the company was. I ended up talking to some people who had like worked there. It turned out that it's basically a like dating service where if you end up enrolling with this company, they will charge you $10,000 or $20,000 to find you a mate. It's like a really, really high value, high touch dating experience service. Nothing to do with the internet. No website, no online meeting, nothing. It's totally consultants, but they use the web as an acquisition channel. So it becomes this really interesting case study in lead gen and like funnel analytics and how to do that at a big scale. And then it's got this interesting twist of like investigative journalism. So I wrote this all up not knowing what to do with it, but just knowing that I thought it was really cool. Jake said, oh, it's really cool, maybe you should put it on the blog. We sent it to a couple of like friends of ours who wrote back, like, this is way too long, nobody's gonna read this. And the next like week was, no exaggeration, we had hundreds of thousands of people landing on RJMetrics.com, not knowing what RJMetrics was, not really knowing anything, but being like, well, that blog post was cool, let me fill out this form. And Jake was busy for a year like on leads like that. And what we've been able to do over time is actually incorporate the RJMetrics product into news stories like this. So the next one that we did wasn't for a couple of years, it was in 2009. Twitter had just come out, it had been out for a few years, but it was like getting big at that moment. And we were able to scrape their API basically and get a whole bunch of information about the Twitter user base. And at that time, Twitter hadn't quite figured a whole lot out technologically. I just actually read the book Hatching Twitter. It's really cool if you haven't read it. It's a good kind of like behind the scenes look at what happened in those early years. But at the time, like if you wanted to see all the information about Biz Stone, then you would go to like twitter.com/API/user/1. And if you wanted to see Evan Williams, it was /2. And if you wanted to see Jack Dorsey, it was /3. And it was just these auto-incrementing integers. So we just went in and hit the API and downloaded all the data about every single Twitter user ever and put it into RJMetrics and loaded up all these cool cohort analyses. Wrote a blog post about it. On a whim, sent an email to tips@techcrunch.com and said, hey, we're running this tomorrow in case you want to cover it. And Eric Schoenfeld, the editor of TechCrunch at the time, emailed me back 5 minutes later and said, don't run it on your blog. We'll run it front and center above the fold all day tomorrow on TechCrunch. And that converted into another like avalanche of leads that were coming in the door. And we've since done it. We've done it for Pinterest and Instagram and Airbnb and Foursquare and Chat Roulette when it was hot for a minute. We just did it for the Ice Bucket Challenge. We've done it on Meetup. We did Ello a couple of weeks ago. These things, when they get hot, journalists love to talk about them and they have nothing to say. And when you can introduce like new data into the story, then you can kind of become part of the story and get mentions and get inbound links. It's great for our SEO, like as a general lift. It's good for credibility, and it's gotten us like anytime we want to splash a bunch of logos of who's covered us before or mentioned us. It's like every major daily in the United States and in Western Europe has done a story that has referenced work that we have done, and that like. That SEO karma and kind of brand karma and thought leadership karma is really valuable for us. And people always say, oh, Bob, you're cheating because your software is data analysis. So you can just like do data analysis and it's easy for you to become part of the story. And I really push back on that argument. I think there are a lot of companies that do an outstanding job of finding new and interesting things to say and somehow kind of crowbarring in something about their brand. And I think that we're no different. So that's a big part of our strategy and a big part of how we were able to be lean early on. By the way, this whole time, like Jake and I didn't collect salary for the first 18 months of running the business, and then after that we collected the equivalent of minimum wage, I think, for 12 to 18 months. Like these were lean times and cheap times for sure. Yeah,
and I think some of the value that I added early on, partially it was the sales aspect, trying to sign up customers, but I think my real core focus was on just being cheap, and mostly. That's someone who knows me.
Everyone who works here just knows that.
And I think sometimes it was certainly took it to a little bit of an extreme where I was like trying to do our legal docs myself just to make sure that the attorney wouldn't ring up an extra hour. But sometimes it was super helpful. So like for example, we wanted to have an animated video on our website. And we got someone to make up an animated screen for a couple $100, and it turned out at that point voice talent was like the way more expensive aspect. But if you signed up for what was called Got Vmail, you get a free on-hold commercial. And so we just basically made this, and that was where you get a voice actor to say, "Welcome to RJMetrics. Your call is very important to us. Hold on." But you could set the script for that person. So we made the script the same thing that we wanted for that video, and we just persuaded them to give us an MP3. And that was like, oh God, I'm so proud of that. And and I think there's a lot of things about just like I'm sitting in the same chair that I sat in Bob's attic. Like a lot of things about like focusing entirely on the things that matter and spending zero resources on anything else. And I think the important part of that is that you stretch out your time for experiments, and you're able to dedicate more resources to the things that do matter. The ways that doesn't make sense is when you're basically foregoing stuff that will actually give you more speed. I don't know, do you have examples about that?
Yeah, and I'll point out the hypocrisy of talking about how we're sitting in the same chairs from 5 years ago as we stand next to our kegerator in this like.
I said focus on the things that do matter. Yeah, we have the things that do matter.
I do think like there are definite false economies when it comes to being cheap as opposed to being lean, and the one thing that I think we never compromise on is people and the happiness of the people that we work with, and that has really translated into us making sure that we're putting energy into places that we think will pay dividends kind of when you think about the long game, and it's there are plenty of things that are insane that have been asked for around here that do not happen for very, very good reasons. But I think by and large, we're able to create an environment where you get a multiplying effect and a lift on, that kegerator, costs $400, and it's like it's part of who we are as a business is like the kind of the culture that's built up around that, and I think that's an exciting thing. So I guess. Trying to think of examples of things that are cheapness that have like the one example that springs to mind is like an argument that you and I got in like 2008, like before anything had taken off in terms of customer growth, where so to start this business, we had both just put like a really small amount of money in the bank, and we were buying office supplies online. And I don't know how much I like embellished the story over the years, but I'm pretty sure it's totally accurate. Like we had a real argument about economies of scales over paper clips, and there was like you could buy like a 50-pack or a 500-pack.
I think actually what it was is that we wanted to get the red stapler. That looked like the one in Office Space, but it cost literally $5 more, and I thought it was wasteful. We ultimately got it.
Yeah, we got it. Yeah. Invest in the people. I really wanted that stapler.
Yeah. One kind of thing in that vein. So we started off in South Jersey, just in Bob's house. He was super unreasonable and ultimately wanted the company to move out of his attic because we did not have central air conditioning, and we were hiring interns, and he did not want two people that he didn't know just in his house all day. So we acquiesced to his iron rule, and we looked for the most capital efficient office space in between where I lived in Center City and where he lived in South Jersey, and we landed on the other startup hub of southeastern area that we're in, which is Camden. So we were in an office in Camden. We had to pass 2 prisons on our way to work. They since knocked one of them down, so it was only 1 now, so it's much safer. But we were having, it was literally the cheapest office space you could possibly get. And we ultimately were having a problem, believe it or not, with recruiting. And there weren't that many people that were applying for our job posting for software engineer in the heart of Camden, very close to the prisons and whatnot. And I think this is my idea, but tell me if this was wrong, where we basically had the idea of doing a MVP of moving to Philadelphia. We thought that this might be the reason why, that we were in Camden, no one wanted to work there. So we just copied and pasted the job posting. We changed the last line of it about our location to say that we're right in the heart of Center City and located next to all cool restaurants and bars and near all these major rail lines, and come apply. And we got way more applicants for that. And it created some kind of awkward conversations when people came into the office for interviews. We were like, well, we actually need you to, come into Camden.
We're working at Camden today.
Yeah, we're working in the Camden office. Yeah. And then we did ultimately retain a broker and get an office in Philadelphia before that person started to fill that role. But it was like just a, kind of a classic lean startup way to figure out, is this actually the problem that we're facing, that nobody wants to work where we are? Or is it because our job posting sucks? Or is it because we suck? Or is it because something else is going on? And it's much, much better to work in Philadelphia than Camden, in case you guys are wondering. So there's knock-on benefits to that as well.
We've probably got about 10 minutes left before Q&A. Maybe the one other topic that's probably worth hitting on is fundraising strategy. And everything that we've talked about to this point has been RJMetrics as a bootstrap company. All the way up until we were in Philadelphia for probably the entirety of our first year, we had not raised a dime of outside capital. Now here we are 2.5 years after that, and we've raised $24 million of venture capital. So what happens? What is that moment? Why do you pull the trigger?
Well, basically, Bob had been saying we should raise money for a while, and eventually he just wore me down. That's not totally true. I think there were a couple things that kind of changed the mindset for us. And first of all, I think bootstrapping makes a lot of sense for our kind of business for the first couple of years, because we weren't taking a salary, we had no office space, we had a couple servers. So if we get a couple clients paying us a couple $100s a month, we're break even though we're not really paying a bunch of other expenses that really exist. So we could do that for a while, and then as we grew the revenue, we would just hire more people and grow revenue a little bit more and hire more people. And we were kind of growing at this reasonable linear clip. And for most of the time, we didn't really feel constrained by cash. Like, certainly it would be nice to hire more people, but it wasn't like we had, like this grand vision of like exactly what we would do if we had $1 million in the bank. But then over time that kind of changed, and we kind of crystallized for us like the path forward. And as we were getting a better understanding of who our customers are, what our pricing strategy should be, how the product should work, what are the reliable ways that we can market, we felt like the lack of capital was increasingly holding us back. And it was also kind of like a risk mitigation thing, where if you have like $4,000 in the bank and a payroll of almost nothing, if your customers go away, it's not that tough to like shell in a little bit more cash. But once you have 15 people on payroll, it's a much bigger operation, and like a much if there's any dip in a bunch of customers churn 1 month, you have a much higher risk of not being able to meet your obligations. That's something you should take really seriously, obviously, because there's people who depend on that for rent and whatnot. So it was kind of a combination of wanting to be more aggressive on the growth side and also wanting to cover our bases on the risk mitigation side. And the other thing that kind of dawned on me, and I definitely want to hear your version of the answer, is just that like there were a lot of stars aligning in terms of investors being interested in this sort of thing. Like some of it was just people like us in our old job just reaching out to us and saying, hey, you look great, we want to invest, how much money are you making? But I think the space that we're in, the kind of customers we were selling to, it was something where like the iron was hot. And if we want to actually make a go of making this like a really big, significant business, we felt like raising money would have to be the way to do that. What's your version?
Yeah, I think the piece I'd add to that is like the thing that we got during the bootstrapping time was a very good understanding of the unit economics of this business. So like what did it really take financially to, in a single customer basis, acquire that customer, onboard them, take them through the sales process, pay for the server to host them, keep them happy through customer success teams and account management, and ultimately kind of fulfill in the relationship. And if you think about that, and this is true for all software as a service businesses, and ultimately is why you see most software as a service businesses raising a ton of capital and spending a lot of that capital in order to operate at scale at high growth rates. The return curve for this kind of looks like a J curve. So it's like on day one, you've spent $0 on this customer relationship, you've captured 0 in revenue, and then for us, we have a 14-day free trial. We onboard people, we have to pay sales reps to bring them on, we have to pay people in customer success roles to actually get them hooked up, we have to pay for the servers.
To market to them.
What's that?
We have to market to them.
We have to market to them to like get the leads in the first place. So as you think about it over time, like you're going into the negatives here, and you're actually losing money on this customer relationship. And how deep that J goes is kind of an important point, because it's the amount of money that you basically have to go out of pocket before you start recouping that money and getting paid back on it. And then depending on how deep you've dipped and what your monthly recurring revenue is, they start paying you once they've converted. Ideally, they convert, and you end up coming back up here. You cross over the profitability line, and at some point in time, you are profitable on that customer relationship. So think about a business where, and this is if you look at software as a service businesses and like the key metrics that drive them all. There's this idea of the SaaS golden number. It's ARR over CAC, so that's annual recurring revenue over the cost of acquiring a customer. Look at the Box S1, look at the HubSpot S1, look at the Zendesk S1. These are all SaaS companies that have IPO'd or will IPO in kind of a one-year window here. Their ARR over CAC tends to be less than 1. So what that means is that they are spending more than a year's worth of revenue in order to acquire a new customer. But they're so confident that customer is still going to be around in a year that the long-term value of that relationship makes it worthwhile. So if you have an ARR over CAC that is higher than 1, then it means you're getting paid back on this relationship sooner and sooner. And it's often an indication that you ought to be spending more money to find more leads, to convert more people, because it's working so extremely well. So for us, when we raised our initial seed round, our ARR over CAC was an 8.1, which any investor takes a look at that and you think, oh, that's great, 8.1, that's like the best ARR over CAC ever. That's a terrible ARR over CAC because it means that you are leaving so much opportunity on the table. But the problem was we didn't have any money. So to do that first part of the J meant us spending to hire those onboarding people, spending to do that marketing, spending to hire a sales team. We couldn't afford to hire those people because our scale was so small. So what it came down to for us was we got really comfortable that our LTV over CAC, like our lifetime value over CAC, at the time was something like 40. So we're getting paid back like 40 times on a customer relationship. Healthy SaaS businesses, the benchmark is something in like the 3 to 5 range. And what we wanted to do was press LTV over CAC downward for the sake of accelerating growth to capture on the market opportunity that was there and allow us to grow the business faster. And that's where the dollars ended up going. So we raised money, we hired a marketing team, we expanded and grew our analyst and account management team more rapidly. We hired a sales force, like rewind to even a year ago today, and we had barely had our first couple of sales hires getting started. This has all really happened very much in real time, but what we've been able to do is we still have a best-in-class ARR over CAC, we still have a best-in-class LTV over CAC, but they're way lower than they were very deliberately, and we are just growing faster than ever by an extremely wide margin, and it's because of invested capital in that way. And when you can show those metrics, that's how we raised $1 million, and then a year later we raised 5, and then a year later we raised 16.5. And it's because the company kept getting bigger and those metrics did not continue to get worse. And in fact, when you have that stability and you can scale with those, then you can build a really freaking big business and investors get really excited and you can get really good terms. And that in combination with the market for, pick your buzzword of the moment, big data, enterprise, SaaS, all these things where I wouldn't necessarily start a business today in all those worlds, but if you have a little bit of a beachhead there and you have a product that's got years of investment in it and you're able to actually tap into the market demand that's being generated right now, you can be in a really good spot, but you got to move fast. And I think that's the conclusion we came to when it came to raising money.
Questions?
Yeah, you want to do some Q&A? Hey, all right.
So 2 questions. First is that you started off as a really, really lean and on the couch for 18 months and nothing in your pocket. And here, most of us have liabilities and families.
Yeah.
So what would you recommend that how should we approach this problem? And then second is that you mentioned that you invest in people and keep them happy. So can you give us a little bit more tricks outside of that machine? How do you keep your employees happy?
It's pretty much just that. To the first part of your question, it's really hard. I mean, I think it was definitely easier for us because we had no or minimal liabilities. I think some people solve that by raising money early on. I think there's a lot of risks that come along with that as well because it's first of all it's a lot more difficult to do that without any demonstrated traction, and you end up getting worse terms. That some people try to do it, on the side, which didn't work for Bob, but might work for somebody else. So I don't have a great answer for, how you do it with, without burning any money, just because my sample size of 1 that we needed to do that. But it's gonna be tough.
Yeah, I think it's almost the kind of thing where this is if I've learned one thing about entrepreneurship is that it's the long game. It's always the long game, and there's a lot of short game you can play. There's a lot of tactics, but I mean, we at any given moment, if you asked us like, what's the future of RJMetrics being, we'd be like, in 2 years we're going to be $1 billion company, and I think that I feel that way right now, and I've always felt that way. But as you find these different kind of graduated measures of success, it actually turns out that the hustle is a big part of it. So one thing that I always mention to people who are kind of in that situation where, say today you've got a job, to use round numbers, I'll say you're making $100K a year and your family needs that to be supported on. And you know that if you start a company, then you're going to have to dial that back to $40K a year for a couple of years to make it happen. Think about that differential and just start acting today like you're making that $40K and just like bank. Because it may, while these things do move really quickly, you might also be talking about this for the next 3 years before you really pull the trigger. And it always seems like it's going to happen tomorrow, but I think that having that lean mindset and kind of putting away what you can to invest against making a personal investment in growth at least will, if nothing else, it will absorb a little bit of the transitional shock. Because when you do pull the trigger and go and start your own thing, there's going to be a lot of things that are very shocking about that. Lifestyle changes, the amount of hours you're working, the style of work. But being able to not only have some money in the bank, but not have it be a big kind of financial lifestyle adjustment, I think is something that everybody can kind of do today, is just start thinking, what would I be doing if I was making half as much money today? Hopefully that's helpful. What was part two?
The other part was how do we, outside of the kegerator?
Yeah.
I honestly do think like the kegerator and the ping pong table and the gong and all that stuff is like the least important stuff that we do. I think things like having all hands meetings every month where everybody gets in the same room and talks about what's going on with the business, having one-on-ones and like reviews every week or a couple weeks with your manager, having team outings where you get to know your coworkers and stuff like that, having work that is actually challenging and interesting, and having no assholes that work here, so people are actually excited to come to work. I think that's like some of the most important stuff. We also have, like, when new people join, we have this thing, RJ Day, where you spend like several days of your first month or two with people who've been here longer, educating you on the history of the company and the culture and the product and the market. So I think it's a lot of stuff that just takes time, and making sure that you empower people to do good work and don't put hooks in them to prevent them from coming up with new stuff. I mean, that's the most important stuff. And free food. Yeah.
That always helps. Yeah, I think our mission here is to inspire and empower data-driven people. And I used to sit in rooms like this and like get so mad at these like pie in the sky like executives that like big companies that were talking about their mission statement and their core values, and like think that was the biggest load of crap. But I think what has really evolved for me as this company has grown is like, it's not a load of crap if like you really truly believe it. And I think the thing that has matured for us over the course of the last couple of years is that like the things that were intrinsic to Jake and myself about how we think about the world and how we want to approach going after this problem, actually saying that out loud as often as possible, and remembering that forget an 83-person company, at a 20-person company, you're not going to see every single person every single day. If you do, you're not going to have a meaningful conversation with them. But when you get a chance to be in a room and say something about what fires you up and why your head popped off of your pillow this morning, that matters in a really big way. And I think that's like, it needs to be true for us that we are so fired up about this thing and really truly believe in it in a really deep way. That has to be true, and it absolutely is. It's kind of what gets us here every day. Communicating that and conveying it on a regular basis, it has this amazing multiplying effect on just making sure that everybody's on the same page, because I think everybody has crappy days sometimes, and everybody gets really, worried some weird thing happens and it's like, oh, a new competitor comes on the scene or we lose a big client or something else. And I think being able to have leadership that is clear and communicates well and sees the forest through the trees and actually knows what they're talking about and spends a lot of time and energy thinking about that matters in probably the biggest possible way around just having culture actually scale. Particularly when you start getting into this, like, not everybody even like knows everybody anymore in a really meaningful way kind of stage.
How did you guys decide to partner together? I know you guys worked at Insight together, but what was that process like? Did you guys decide you have complementary skill sets, or how did you decide to come together?
It was super sophisticated, and I take full credit. So basically, Bob came up with the idea, and he told all the people that we work with, and then I came by his desk one day, I was like, yo, instead of you doing this, how about we do this? And I had, like, prior to that, I had been thinking about joining a startup or starting a startup or thinking about, and like, it was very difficult for me to get excited about the people I was talking to or the product ideas, and like I was trying to learn to code better so I could make a trivia game because I love Trivial Pursuit. Like there was all sorts of things that I was kind of grasping at straws. And so basically when Bob told us about his idea, I was like, all right, well, this guy's a lot smarter than anybody else I've talked to. And this product is like my favorite part of this job. It's like doing that deep dive. So basically I just cornered him and didn't let him leave his desk until he said yes.
And I had just a ton of respect for what Jake had accomplished at Insight in doing things that I was not able to do. Gaining a reputation for just being an outstanding communicator and great at networking and kind of having a lot of those skills that are absolutely required to make a business a success. And we had really not worked together on a deal even.
Yeah.
Like we knew each other from the foosball table. But I think that was...
Where I dominated.
Yeah. I knew him from losing at the foosball table.
Yeah, right.
But I think those things just kind of were able to combine in a way. Look, we got lucky a little bit too, honestly. I think we did. But I also think having worked together for so long, like there's a little bit of like mean reversion that happens where I have, there are things about Jake's personality and style that I have a lot of respect for and have like absorbed to some extent. And I would hope you would say the opposite is true.
I would agree that there are a lot of things about me that are worth absorbing. That's definitely true. No, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think we are more. We definitely think about things. I think we've learned a lot from each other. And yeah, I mean, I think it is. We got super lucky. It's absolutely true. Like I know people who have nightmare relationships with their co-founders, and there's just no way you can be successful if that happens. And I think if you get along, that doesn't mean you're going to be successful. So it is definitely necessary, but not sufficient.
What do you think is your edge compared to the competition? Is it the hustle? Is it the product? Is it marketing? Is it secret sauce? Is it the kegerator?
Definitely. I think the most important thing is the people. I think it's the people who are interacting with our customers and the people who are building the product and the people who are marketing and the people who are selling. I think that's definitely the most important thing, and that has consequences in a lot of ways. But yeah, I think the most important thing is kind of the way that we approach it, and just like a lot of people stink. And they're just selling in very dishonest ways, or they're trying to do things that are not in the customer's best interest. And then ultimately, like, because of that prioritization we have, so like Bob said, our mission is to inspire and empower data-driven people. And so when we start from that perspective and just giving our customers superpowers to analyze their data to make it grow faster or finish work early so they can go home and see their kid's soccer game, I think that falls out in the product actually being a better solution for them, and then also being like very targeted. Like we're not trying to do this for everybody in the world. There's a specific subset of companies that we're a great fit for. And there's a lot that we're just not a fit for. And you can see on our marketing and the way that our team is trained, like if you are if Arby's were to come to us, it would just be obvious that we have no idea what to do with you, and we would wish you a lot of luck. But for the kind of customers we're built for, it's just a total slam dunk for them.
Yeah, sorry.
What was your sleep schedule like in that? Because I know startups that for the first 6 months, like I'm still going through right now, where you're pretty much like at an hour, 2 hours a day. Like starting that, like leaving, in working together in the office and like being in the attic. Were you guys in there 18 hours a day, or did you like half work, half foosball days? Like, what was it like first 6 months? Two of you guys working together.
Great example of false economies. I don't think I ever slept a 2-hour night. I think that there were certainly nights where, I remember this one time when we were working with Dropio with Sam Lesson, I had to build this caching thing, and I pulled an all-nighter. There was like the one time, and that was on like a client support request. In those early days, I think we worked really hard. We worked long days. We had come from finance where a 12-hour day was not crazy, and I think we kind of emulated that kind of 10 to 14-hour day. But I think particularly when it was a company that was based out of my house, at some point in time, like I started just going out of my mind. And there was an era in this business where the company was technically based in my attic. Jake would get off the Paco, having come from Center City, and walk down the street that was leading to my house. And I could not work out of my house anymore. I was just out of my mind. So I was working out of the Collingswood Public Library. I would go and program there every day. And it's the same street, goes by the library. So at like 8:45 in the morning, we'd walk past each other on the sidewalk and high five. I'd go and work for 10 hours in the library. He'd work in my house for 10 hours, and we'd call it a day. So I think there are environmental things where I think sleep is a little bit of a relative thing where if you're really fired up about something and super passionate, you're not working for 22 hours and saying, man, I hate my job. You're blinking and 22 hours went by. And I think that's fundamentally different than having something that's totally grueling that's keeping you from actually having a certain level of life satisfaction. But despite the havoc that has been wreaked on my hairline over the course of building this business, there's actually not, we're very proactive about making sure that stress is not something that's going to be like debilitating. And our team works hard as hell here, definitely, and they get stressed out a lot. But we also like Bill Peel, who was our second hire ever and is our director of engineering. He advocated. He was one of the few guys who actually came to work for us in Camden. And he advocated for a nap room really early on. And he was one of the big early advocates for everybody here has a geek desk, which is a hydraulic, like sitting, standing desk. And all of those, lifestyle, environmental things are big to us. When we talk about investing in people, that's the kind of stuff that we invest in. And if you are kicking ass at your job and you were here late last night and you want to take a nap on that beanbag chair, go nuts. Like, this is not a place where people are, getting yelled at for not being at their desk at 9 a.m. You are awesome or you're not here. And in the course of being awesome, you can pretty much do whatever you need to have a good lifestyle too. Yeah.
I was intrigued when you mentioned ARR over the COAC?
CAC, yeah,
CAC,
CAC, yeah.
And LTV over CAC as metrics for SaaS companies.
Yeah.
Can you just go into more what that is exactly? How do you calculate it? And if there are other metrics that you use to kind of measure the value of the company or KPIs?
Sure. So ARR is annual recurring revenue, and so ARR over CAC is going to be a number that is looked at for a particular period in time. So you can have an ARR over CAC for a day if you want. You can have it for a month. We tend to look at it on a quarterly basis because all of our goals and metrics are built around the quarters. So ARR in that calculation for quarterly is how much new annual recurring revenue did you gain in that quarter. So if we got 100 new customers and they all pay us $500 a month, then that's $50,000 of monthly recurring revenue that was acquired during that quarter, which means that it's $600,000 of annual recurring revenue. So the ARR on top of that is $600,000. And it's basically like a bookings number, or it's like how much new recurring revenue did you get, and then annualize that out, like stretch it out to represent what that represents in a year. And then for CAC, you basically look at how much money you spent in order to get that. So what we tend to do for CAC is we don't look at, CAC for us is every single dollar spent on sales and marketing combined, with no exceptions. So the sum of those for us, we tend not to use the same quarter because we have a sales cycle that takes a few months.
Sharon asked a question.
It's basically phase shifted by 3 months. So whatever we spent in the quarter before on sales and marketing is the CAC number. So if we had 600K of new ARR and then we had 300K of CAC, then we know that our ARR over CAC was a 2.0. And we're getting basically paid back twice on any dollar that goes out the door for sales and marketing within the course of the first year of that relationship. That's really critical. I think if you look at the way that the market values companies right now in terms of other metrics, really all the inputs to that, if you think about the things that go into that, are what matter. So it's the actual annual recurring revenue, so actually scale, the growth rate, and I'd say churn and customer retention are probably like the most important. So that's where when you do that LTV over CAC calculation, look at your churn rate. If you're losing 3% of your customers every month, then you've got about 30-ish months before they're gone. So you multiply your ARR over CAC by by however many years that is, 2.5 years. Sorry to get into the weeds there. I love that stuff. Yeah.
Well, first, do you guys send out like a SparkNotes version of some of those metrics?
Yeah, totally. If you, I would strongly recommend. We just had a post on our blog by one of our investors. His name's Karan Mahandru. He's a partner at Trinity Ventures. It's all about basically the metrics that matter to investors for SaaS companies. ARR over CAC is in there, churn, retention, they're all in there. There's also a really good blog called SaaStr, SAASTR, that is all about the economics of building a SaaS business. That's super interesting. But yeah, if you check out blog.rjmetrics.com, you'll hit the jackpot on this stuff.
Okay. So the other thing was I wanted to hear more about the team building process and everything from how you look for people initially, how you look for people later on, how you even interview people, what you're looking for, and how the process is going as far as even just like monitoring team health and like have you had to fire anyone and etc.
Yeah.
A lot of questions.
Yeah. So I'll take the fun part, hiring people. Our process for hiring people has evolved a lot. And I think it's not so much that it's evolved because the company is different, just I think that we've gotten better at it because I think a lot of the positions we're hiring for today are the same as the first positions we were looking for. And honestly, a lot of it came from people that we hired giving us feedback on the process. Chris Merrick, who's now our VP of Engineering, who's literally the first person that we hired, he told us after the fact that we did a terrible job of interviewing him. So we put him in charge of interviewing. I think probably the biggest thing that we've done that's been really helpful is instituting projects for virtually every role, where if before you come in for an interview, and depending on exactly when the process, it varies, but you will do some project that is related to what your eventual job is going to be. So if you're going to be talking to customers, you're going to need to record a voicemail of you leaving a voicemail for a customer so we can make sure that you can string a sentence together, that you can sound confident, that you can speak intelligently to a challenging situation. And for different roles, it varies. And I think that tells us two things. First of all, do you have the skills for the job? And do you actually really want this job? Because this is not something you can do in 5 minutes. And like everybody who comes and works here, you assemble your desk in the first month or two. So this should tell you something that like, if you're used to an environment where like everything is totally set up and the rails are perfect and everything is pristine, this is not the right fit for you. So we want to encourage people to not apply. Because if you don't really want it, great, there are a lot of other great jobs out there. So I think that's a really important part of it. That also screens out a huge number of people. And it screens out people who are not willing to do the work and who just like don't have good grammar or spelling, or who just clearly have never really thought about what someone in this role would want. And then once you get into the actual interview process, I think it's much more similar to other interview processes. I think we look for the kinds of things that we were just talking about are our core values, where people who are, will be good to work with, do have, the raw materials to succeed, do care about data and are interested in our industry and are interested in startups, and who are, I think the way we talk about the company a lot, it's like a meritocracy of nerds. It's, you should be super excited about being wrong about something because that means you just learned something. Because you had one idea before and now you've got something wrong. So we'll try to bring that out in some way during the interview, whether you're pushing you to your limits of understanding or something, or teaching us something. So I think that's all part of it. To answer your question, yes, we have fired people, and it totally stinks.
Yeah, it's never it's never a easy process, and I think it's like because of the fact that we really like the people. Like I've never fired anybody because I thought they were a terrible person, or because there was some kind of they punched somebody in the face or something like that. Like we haven't had situations like that. It's just sometimes it doesn't work out. Yeah. I think there are also, as we get into having a bigger and bigger company, we become more and more aware, even when like talking about this stuff publicly, like the universe of HR and HR law and all of the things that you need to be very sensitive to and thoughtful about when speaking to is pretty vast. And I think we've been really fortunate to have an unlimited parade of just amazing people come through here. The people that are still here, the people that have been here and it didn't work out because of our decision or their decision. I think everybody's been really tremendous. So. I think that's a testament to what happens before we end up hiring people. And I think if we've made mistakes at all, it's probably been false negatives and not false positives. Like we have not had to let a lot of people go, and we're really fortunate for that. But we've probably said no to some people that probably would have worked out fine. It probably would have been great. But we try and set the bar so that we're not, we're not letting people through the filter that have a lower likelihood of success. Yeah.
What was it like, in reading some of the articles beforehand, what was it like making that decision not to go build that single company, the product that they wanted, and sticking with your long-term vision? Because when you were in the attic, right, and rarely working overnighters and probably working on the Penske file in your
Yeah.
There had to be some,
yeah, it's a deep cut.
There had to be some trouble, like sticking to that long-term vision, or even really understanding what it was. So, I would be interested if you could expand a little bit on what it was like to, like, sort of, I don't know, fire the customer is the right word, but like kind of say, no, I don't want all that business. I'm going to stick to my vision.
So I think probably more often we made the opposite mistake. We went the opposite way, which was a mistake very often. So there were a bunch of cases in the beginning where we built stuff because one customer wanted it, and they would tell me, yes, I'll sign up if you just build this thing. And I would just walk over to Bob like, can you really build this thing? And we did. And we did that a bunch of times with features that we ultimately subsequently ripped out. And that is like the worst kind of terrible because we not only invested all the time to build them, and then they often didn't get a lot of love because only one person wanted them, it turned out. And then fast forward a year later, we have a customer who's been with us for a year or two, and we decide, okay, this feature was a failure, we're going to rip it out. And this person who said, this is the only reason I'm signing up, and because I told them, yes, we're going to do this for you, we have to tell them this is going to go. So there's one feature in particular that I'm thinking of that it was like they're currently like the oldest company that we work with, like in terms of the length of our relationship. So they demanded this feature in order to sign up. And then we ended up getting, I think, like 1 or 2 other companies who used that same feature later on. So we made the decision to kill that. And I had some very uncomfortable conversations where I was like, yes, this is why you're using us, and unfortunately we are declining it. And 2/3 of the people said, okay, they just kept paying us. And the other one was like, okay, I'm sorry to hear that. You got to run your business, and yeah, it was nice working with you. And so it was like insanely easy, but I was incredibly worked up with it ahead of time. And 2 of the 3 people didn't really care. Like, we could have gotten the business, so I just did a bad job of ascertaining. I was just running all over the place trying to convince anybody to give us money.
You made it sound really important.
Yeah, I do. I'm very persuasive. It's like lying. So like I think we understood that wrong, and as we've gotten more time under our belt, we've had more confidence about what things are with our vision and what things aren't. And there's things that our current customers want that we're either not building or not building today, and there's things that our prospects want that we're not building or not building today. But we just are very, very conscious of what every new thing costs. There's a maintenance burden, there's a development burden, it means we're not doing something else. So it's super tough, and I think spending a lot of time figuring out what is translating our vision into the specific features that people need is a very, very tough job.
I think keeping a little bit of perspective about why you're doing what you're doing, I think helps with those saying no and firing customer cases, where you can get really lost in the tactical of, okay, we're in Camden, we've got a business that's maybe bringing in $5 grand a month of revenue. It's like enough to hire one person, and there's a new customer that comes along. They want to pay us just them. They're going to pay $5 grand in revenue. We'll double the revenue of the business, but we know we're going to have to build these 10 specific things for them, and it's going to not be reusable, etc. It's like it's a question of like the tactical versus the strategic. It's like, do we want to focus on this near-term thing? It's a no-brainer. On paper, it looks like everything's moving in the right direction. And then you think about like, what's the opportunity cost of our time? And what are the things that we're going to do, particularly when you're at that early of a stage, to like point the ship in the right direction? Because the bigger the ship gets, the harder it's going to be to turn. And I think that when you take that step back and you say, I would really love to be paying myself more than $7 an hour right now, it helps you say, okay, maybe we should sign up Comcast or whoever as a customer. But when you take a step back and say, going from $7 to $10 an hour, that's what I'm going to sacrifice the core vision and like the mission of this business for, and then it becomes a really super easy decision.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you had talked about early on, you kind of made it so that the potential client would log onto the website and there's just a fake data set there. Can you talk about that more? I just love the concept of like, you don't have full algorithms all done, just like show what it could be just to gauge interest. Could you talk about like what that looked like?
Yeah, I probably built it in a day. It was so we work primarily back then. Almost all the data that we pulled in was from people's back-end databases, and in a lot of cases it was shopping carts. So It's like who bought what when and where did they come from. It was like an orders table and a customers table and an items table. And I basically wrote a simulator. It was not unlike simulating poker hands, you know, in that poker software. So the way the simulator worked was it started back, you know, 3 years beforehand, and it would say, okay, it's January 1st, 2007. What happened today? And there's a couple of probability distributions and saying, okay, this customer showed up and they bought this item, and it's just randomly grabbing things. And you're running Monte Carlo simulations of reality for an e-commerce company. And we just ran a bunch of simulations until we got one that we liked, and that created good-looking cohort analyses and things. And then every single day at midnight, we had a cron job run that would simulate the next day. And then all that day's data got in, and if you logged into that client, it just looked like a real business.
Wow.
And that was like a sloppy PHP script that probably lived for the first 5 years of this business before it was in a hackathon. We had some people like do it up right.
So I was on that hackathon team, and I think the interesting lesson to take from this is that you basically have to be Bob to come up with that idea, to like do a Monte Carlo distribution, to like generate a fake data set, to like figure out all these probabilities, to make it look like a real business, to figure out some actionable insights that you can display in the thing. The thing we ultimately replaced that with is that we just faked the whole thing. We just made it by hand, and then every day we just move all the dates forward by one. And so like
it's actually much better. It's
way better. And so like if you're thinking like, oh god, I'm not going to be able to program a Monte Carlo thing to do the whatever, like don't worry. If you just make the, I just learned this reference. It's like it's like the thing with the cardboard houses and Potemkin Village.
Yeah.
What was that? Potemkin Village, I think. I don't know if it's related to Mandy Patinkin, but it's just the very facade, the veneer, the colorful candy shell, and even if what behind the scenes is just like, yep, I just I did it in Excel and I did it 1,000 times. That works too, and you can like control that exactly, and then when you decide, hey, no, I want to change that, you just pop it back out and do it manually. So you can do it in a really unsophisticated way as well.
And in the end, like when you showed it to these people, to the clients, they were like, "Oh, like actually, I would love to have data like that," and that was enough.
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, that enough. That eliminated that reason for saying no. There was still a cornucopia of other reasons that I got.
It's probably worth mentioning that we still have it.
Oh yeah, that's like a core thing. You go sign up on our website right now. You got fabulous data. Yeah.
So what's the biggest challenge that you face today?
Great question. I've probably said this when I asked this question for the past year or so, but one of my biggest fears is that we will double the company next year and lose market share because our market is growing so extremely quickly that even if we grow at a triple-digit % annual rate, the pace at which opportunity has been created and other people playing in the space have kind of moved in and participated in a land grab has actually like meant that we could have grown at 600% if we had actually captured in on all the opportunity. So I think that's slightly more up in the clouds. Maybe there's a more tactical answer that Jake might have, but I think for us it's like it's not good enough to be in the top 1% of fastest growing companies in the world because we live in a space where, by virtue of being in the space, some of that is like table stakes. And the question is like, how do you, it's not about the 2x, it's about the 10x, and how do you get there?
Yeah, so I'd say, just in terms of like personally, my biggest challenge, and I think this is probably somewhat true for Bob too, it's, for the past 6 years, the thing that we did that made us, successful and grow at the beginning was the wrong thing to do following that, so we had to change that, and we had to change it again. So I think one of the interesting things about working at a company like this, and I don't think this is just this is not just true for the two of us, but constantly redefining our roles and figuring out like what is the right thing to do. Because like there was a point when I could succeed by staying up an extra 2 hours and answering all the customer support tickets, and that is what I did for a very long time. And then I did that for too long, and then I didn't get enough sleep, and our customers were pissed off, and they left, and then like it was like, oh wow, why don't we have a team of people who specialize in that? And that process has repeated itself many times over. So as we look at the whole company with that kind of lens and say, we had a team of analysts, and then we split those apart, and then that turned out to be a really good idea, and then we've rejiggered all these different things within the company. So basically looking at a system that's working well and deciding how to change it is something that is super challenging. So that like organizational design and defining everybody's role is to me the most challenging part, and also probably the most interesting.
Just real quick, you have a wonderful story, and thank you for sharing it. And as you talk about where you were and where you're now and where you see yourself going, it sounds like there's a big psychological management, emotional management component that you guys have to go through. And I wonder what that's like how you kind of keep your head together and don't freak out about like the stakes as they are, and since you're even trying to go higher than you.
I think part of the benefit is that our freaking out is less than perfectly correlated. So it's very often the case that I'm freaking out and he's not, or vice versa. So I think just having a co-founder is extremely helpful. And also now we're fortunate that we have like 83 awesome other people to talk about this stuff. So like there's certain things where, you know, I'll talk to Anita about something and she'll like just, oh no, this is not a problem. And here's why, because at this other company I was at, they had the same challenge and they did the same thing. I think we get the same sort of thing from our investors where they talk about the other companies they invest in. But it is also a stressful thing. I mean, I have never had a job that was stress-free. That sounds awesome. I don't know, I'm assuming those of you who are not doing your companies full-time also have stress in your work. But yeah, I think it's just surrounding yourself with people that can support you and have some perspective and actively getting that perspective.
Yeah, I think I would have lost my mind by now if I was not able to hire people that I thought were smarter than me and able to do certain elements of what I once did better than I could possibly do. And I think I wrote the original version of RJMetrics, and it has now almost entirely been ripped out and thrown in the trash and rewritten by engineers that are 10 times better than I am at engineering. And I used to tag team with Jake on doing customer support and implementing new customers, and now we have just these amazing teams of people that are much better interfacers with clients than we ever were, and also just a lot more kind of there's a level of intellectualism and kind of curiosity around doing that job particularly well that I think really clicks with those teams, and that's something that's really exciting. So like there were certainly eras in this business where, you know, I was kept up at night wondering like, oh, I wonder if so-and-so client's update is running ahead of schedule or behind schedule. And it's not to say that those worries don't exist anymore. It's that there are people here who I trust with the health of this business to take on that responsibility. And that is scalability. Like that is exactly how you grow a business. And it's like even the seemingly most elegant business in the world is, you know, it's not something that just magically kind of grows and scales. Like it's a hustle, it's a grind, and it's just a question of how can you disperse the responsibility of executing on that among as many people as possible. And I think the thing that keeps me sane is the fact that I actually think if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, I think this everybody would be very, very sad, and I'm sure you wouldn't do as well. But I think the company would be like, you know, me. I was in Brazil last week speaking at a conference, and like, I came back here and like 500 amazing things had happened, and just like the train is on the tracks, and it's because of people. And that's why we talk about investing in people so much, because it's the only way to make this scaling work.
All right, one more question.
The way things are changing in the business landscape. I mean, like today, you know, IBM announces they have to pay someone $1 billion and they have to take their chip business off their hands. Right? I mean, do we think that business is reaching the point? You know, Amazon no longer, they can't make money. How much scale do you need, right, for a small country? Do we think eventually that businesses now just have a shelf life, and you constantly, like, you know, you were talking about pivoting, but you know, you mentioned eventually it wasn't even a pivot; it was a new business. Do we think that's the way that this is going? That businesses last so long and that's it, and you just have to kind of be able to flip the switch and start the next one?
So I would say like with the Amazon example, I think if you like piece it apart, I think they have some mature businesses that are making a ton of money and some early businesses that are losing a bunch of money. So like if you look at the whole thing as one, they're not, and I think that is a useful way to think about businesses in general. Like I'm 100% positive that if we did the same thing that we're doing today and made no changes, eventually we would go out of business. because absolutely, like you're saying, there are people who come in to compete, and the state of the art would move forward. So I think the trick is to just stay ahead of that curve, and I think that's what everyone's doing every day, figuring out like how can I make it so my job is unnecessary because I'm going to automate it, because I'm going to hire someone else to do it better, because we're going to go after a customer that doesn't need this, or how can I do it 10 times as quickly because of all these clever things I'm thinking of. So I think all of that is just trying to run as fast as possible to make sure that you never get into a position where you need to pay someone $1 billion to get rid of your thing. Like, that wasn't a problem that happened yesterday. That's been going on for a while. That's my initial take on it.
Yeah, I think that I'm a firm believer in the existence of macroeconomically speaking, long-term economic expansion existing. It's just a question of how is that diversified across like many businesses. And I think there are, there are businesses that have businesses like General Electric that have been around for quite some time, and then you look at the wealthiest people in previous American generations, and the money from the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts, like the money's still around with those industries. The railroads and the oil industries. It's a very different story today in terms of the amount of like the economic opportunity that exists there. And I think technology and internet business is probably similar. The question is how do you GE goes from convention ovens to aircraft engines and to owning media companies. So. I think there is a way to survive, but it's hard, and you gotta evolve.
All right, thank you, Bob and Jake.